Happy Friday, Carnies, and welcome back to the Daily Carnage Show. I'm Shannon, I'm your host, and this week I have something a little bit different for you. You know, part of what we love as a team about running a daily marketing newsletter is that every day is different. There's always news to break, cool campaigns to cover, controversies, conversations happening in ad land, and our content moves necessarily as fast as the industry. But in recent months, we've been testing this new long-form channel as a way to break out stories from the daily newsletter into a weekly format to add more texture and color. And the test has been going great. If you've already subscribed or commented across any of the video or podcast platforms, thank you. We're all super stoked behind the scenes to hear your feedback and continue to improve and develop this channel. And so whenever Adland has a slow news week, I think it would be really interesting to have evergreen, comprehensive discussions about the industry at large. You know, special nerdy episodes. And a nerdy idea that I've had recently is an eco-critical marketing series that I'm calling Brand versus Planet. So a multi-part series in which each episode features an example of marketing and advertising exerting a disproportionate influence over consumer behavior, ultimately resulting in negative consequences for the planet and people. I just think it's a really good time for conversations about marketing and advertising through an eco-critical lens. And a necessary part of that discussion are the ways in which marketers have contributed to really healthy propaganda for the planet. So it's not all bad news. And to talk about these things, we'll bring in history, science, sociology, and of course our favorite, pop culture. Believe it or not, I'm on year 13 in this industry. And I've always marveled at how there's so little time for ethical discussions in the brainstorm room. Things move so fast. But meanwhile, the work that we do is so incredibly influential. And I've always suspected that if we understood more of that history, we could operate more intelligently, more responsibly. The one thing I've always reminded myself of, no matter what brand I was writing for, was the stories we tell people about themselves matter. Consumers metabolize and internalize the art that we make in order to make their purchase decisions. And sometimes the consequences of that are not just corporate revenue. Sometimes they're ecosystem collapse and cultural paradigm shift. That stuff is so interesting to me, and I hope it will be interesting to you as we kind of work through these discussions. And with the first installment of Brand versus Planet, I want to talk today about the Chilean sea bass. So without further ado, grab your coffee. Let's get started. This is a story about manufacturing, supply, and demand out of thin air, or rather deep sea. The Chilean sea bass. It goes by many names. Officially, it's the Disostichus eleginoides. Maybe, I don't know how to pronounce that. Or the Patagonian toothfish. Or, to most fishermen before the 21st century, trash. The Chilean sea bass is hysterically neither particularly Chilean or a bass at all. So it lives in deep cold waters around Antarctica and the southern tip of South America. And bless its heart, this fish is so goddamn ugly. It has giant eyes, a lower jutting jaw full of teeth, and it unfortunately can grow to be the size of a human. But we're here to talk about the transformation to Chilean sea bass, and it all began in the late 1970s. So Lee Lance is a wholesale fish importer from California. So on a trip to a Chilean port, Lance discovers the Patagonian toothfish. He figures its mild, flaky white meat would be popular with consumers, and the fishermen tell him, this is a trash fish, we don't use it. And Lance sees dollar signs. What we have here is a new fish. It will be abundantly available and cheap to import. But the problem, Lance knows this, is that US consumers are never going to order toothfish off a menu. So he coins the name Chilean sea bass. And there's something sophisticated about it. It simultaneously appeals to the American obsession with exoticism. This fish is from very far away. And the need for recognition, because Americans are already familiar with sea bass. It's brilliant and poetic even. It is categorically incorrect, but poetic. And so in 1994, the US FDA approves the name for commercial use. Open season begins. By the 1990s, the Chilean sea bass becomes the darling of the high-end restaurant scene. It penetrates pop culture. It's on the menu at the Four Seasons. Ironically, it even makes a cameo in the eco-critical blockbuster Jurassic Park.
Alejandro's prepared a delightful menu for us. Chilean sea bass, I believe. Shall we?
Really spectacular, spared no expense.
And at this point in time, Chilean sea bass is actually filling a market gap caused by overfishing of popular fish like cod and haddock. But its growth in popularity wouldn't be sustainable. Demand continued to grow while Chilean sea bass stock plummeted. These so-called Chilean sea bass can live up to 50 years, and they can grow up to 200 pounds, which are all things working in its favor. But unfortunately, they're slow to mature and reproduce. So they're uniquely susceptible to overfishing. And by the early 2000s, scientists are starting to raise the red flag. Around this time, more than 16,000 tons of Chilean sea bass are harvested legally. However, experts estimate that illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing added as much as double the amount to the actual loss. And to make matters worse, Chilean sea bass are primarily caught by bottom trawling, which is a process of dragging nets across the ocean floor at a depth of about 1,300 feet or more. As you can imagine, when you're doing this, you're not only catching Chilean sea bass, you're often scooping up a lot of juvenile fish and unintended marine life. You're disrupting and damaging ocean ecosystems, and ultimately depleting future fish stocks. A study by the University of British Columbia found that between 1950 and 2015, about 25 million tons of deep sea fish caught by bottom trawling went unreported, which, as you can imagine, skews really essential data and statistics that tons of government bodies need to make decisions. Meanwhile, the bait that these fishermen use to catch Chilean sea bass is often frozen, meaning that it floats on the surface of the ocean until it thaws. And of course, birds will try to eat this frozen bait and become hooked, and they'll be dragged to their death as the line sinks. It's reported that around 100,000 albatrosses were being killed in this manner each year. So while all of this is going on, the US government reports that as much as 2/3 of Chilean sea bass imports have been caught illegally. Environmental groups start responding. Whole Foods halts sales of the Chilean sea bass, and a new marketing campaign begins in Northern California, where 60 restaurant chefs pledge to take a pass on the Chilean sea bass. The movement spreads west to east, with over 700 US chefs signing the pledge, urging consumers to demand more traceable, sustainably sourced seafood, or to just avoid it altogether. Now, you might be getting ready to comment, hey, I just had Chilean sea bass last night. It's totally back on the menu. And you're right. Chilean sea bass is not exactly endangered anymore, but it is still considered vulnerable in some areas. Conservation efforts have really improved the situation. There are a lot more strict trade documentation requirements now, but illegal Chilean sea bass still enters the market. It still has a really high market value thanks to fine dining, which means it's a persistent target for rogue operators. Currently, the United States imports about 10,000 tons of Chilean sea bass annually, but only a small portion of that is sourced near Chile and shipped fresh. U.S. demand for Chilean sea bass actually accounts for up to 20% of global supply. And this is a clear signal that the associations that Lee Lance engineered between this Patagonian toothfish and fine dining and luxury and identity, all with a simple name rebrand, are echoing into time as stories we tell people about fish and themselves often do. And this isn't the only example of rebranding the sea. Lobsters and oysters were once subsistence foods associated with lower class coastal communities who relied on them to meet their basic nutritional needs. And now in most places you have to shell out to experience them. In the legend of the Chilean sea bass, I don't mean to suggest that Lee Lance is a villain. I think most people would agree he was a really smart business person, but I do think it is an interesting allegory about how the world of marketing can tend to, in the process of solving a problem of capitalism, create other crises for the land and the sea and the people that live there, and how it's also uniquely positioned to then respond and solve those problems too. Take a pass on Chilean bass worked. It allowed chefs and restaurants to differentiate and position themselves as ethical and sustainable. It created a culture of agency for restaurant goers, encouraging them to be curious about where their food was sourced from. And it slowed down this explosive demand enough for the Chilean sea bass populations to recover. Ultimately, I think it's a story about creativity and adaptability and unintended consequences and the ways in which we respond. And I think it's a story we're going to see over and over again, and we as marketers are going to be a part of, as climate change and other factors affect supply and demand. So for that reason, I think it's an important story to talk about, important history to know. And I have a whole list of other stories just like this that illuminate the good, the bad, the ugly, the neutral consequences of our incredible power and influence as marketers and advertisers. But if you can think of anything that would be right for the Brand versus Planet series, make sure to comment down below. And you can always keep the conversation going in our exclusive Facebook community for the Daily Carnage. That wraps it up for the Daily Carnage Show. Thanks so much for joining me. I'd love it if you rated our show, liked and subscribed across our socials where you can find us at the Daily Carnage. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to the Daily Carnage newsletter. Until next week, I'll see you in the inbox. Have a good weekend, Carnies.